the Stoics wanted us to be able to handle our difficult emotions and manage things. They didn't say that we should repress our emotions. Obviously, that's not a good idea. Repression can lead to some terrible things. So it's kind of, dealing with difficult emotions and powerful feelings is something that the Stoics talk about a lot, and they've got strategies and things and managing them. So yeah, I think it's we're human. We're all going to have emotions. We can't get rid of that. But it's what do we do when they crop up? And the Stoics have great advice for all these different things that we're going to encounter.
Perfect. So I'm joined on the show today by my very good friend and author of this incredible book, Ben Aldridge. Ben has been on the show before, but this is the first time via video. The first time was audio only because we had some problems. So it's nice to see you on the other side of the camera, Ben.
Well, it's great to be here, and thanks again for asking me to come back.
Amazing. So a lot of the stuff we didn't get to talk about last time, your love of philosophy and what the book is sort of built around more than anything. And in the beginning of the book, you describe philosophy as the ultimate self-help and mind training tool there is. Why do you think philosophy is such a powerful tool? And what would you say to those people that sort of criticize philosophy for just being all questions and not many answers?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think there's two parts to that. Firstly, I think a lot of philosophy is based on logic and reasoning. And we can see that a lot of modern therapies are actually based on ancient philosophy. So, for instance, CBT and REBT, these types of therapies are based on Stoicism, ancient Greek philosophy. And all of this is that kind of continuation of logic and reasoning. And I think that's what's so appealing about philosophy for me. I think it's just leaning into that has been particularly helpful. And for those for those people who think that philosophy is only academic, then I would suggest looking at different types of philosophy, because obviously you've got, political philosophy, and there's lots of different conceptual ideas within philosophy that can be very academic. But I think the practical philosophy is where it's at. Well, it's the kind of philosophy that I really enjoy. So that's why I'm into Stoicism so much. And actually elements of Buddhism are incredibly practical. A lot of Western philosophy as well. Eastern philosophy is fantastic for that. Taoism and Buddhism, Zen, I'm particularly interested in. So I think a lot of the ideas from these philosophies can be very practical, and we can use them in our lives. So that's why I think it's the ultimate self-help tool. And because a lot of the ideas that we talk about in self-help have basically just stolen these ancient ideas and just revamped them.
Yeah, definitely, man. And what I love about philosophy is it's just full of timeless truths, things that have stood the test of time, that were relevant now as they were, all those years ago. So that's why I love philosophy more than most things, subjects in self-help. So who are some of your favorite philosophers to read then?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I've got Marcus Aurelius's Meditations on the go. I mean, I say that I always have that on the go, really. It's one of those books that you can reread multiple times. It's timeless. The fact that it was written 2,000 years ago, but a lot of these ideas are so relevant, and the way that he was thinking is just fantastic. Very clear, in a position where he was the Roman emperor for 20 years. And I mean, you can imagine at that time, probably he was the most powerful man on the planet, and how easily corruptible you could be in a position like that. And he used Stoicism to guide him. And it's just amazing what that did for him, and how he navigated so many crazy setbacks and all these different things. They had, the Antonine Plague, and loads of wars and loads of very intense situations. So yeah, it's really, really interesting. So that one is on the go at the moment. I tend to read a lot of books on Zen Buddhism as well. I really like Alan Watts. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff, but
love Alan Watts.
The way that he talks about Zen is just brilliant. He really puts it into perspective, and he brings a really nice angle on things. So yeah, there's always something on the go.
You mentioned that obviously a lot of philosophy just gets sort of repackaged today in new books, but a lot of authors are sort of basing their books around understanding philosophy in the modern world. Stoicism, a big one. I think of people like Ryan Holiday, who's sort of made a career out of explaining these old ideas in a modern way, and to an extent, your book does that as well. In what way was this book born out of that Stoic philosophy? What are the key messages from that philosophy that are embedded into this book and the premise behind it?
So I think I lightly touch on Stoicism and how it really helped me. And I kind of talk about the element of control. That's like, I call it the Stoics' golden rule. And it's basically that we can't control a lot of things that happen to us, but we can control how we respond to those external events. And that's really the key for me that's been so helpful, especially dealing with anxiety, which is really the main reason why I wrote the book in the first place. And I found that idea has been absolutely fantastic. Being able to use that whenever you face a setback, just kind of running through the list of things you can control and the things you can't control. And you'll notice that actually there's so many things that are outside of your control. So focusing on all of those things can be not a waste of time, but it's not going to help you. You can often make the situation worse by thinking about all the things that you can't control. So it's leaning into what you can control, which is how you are managing the situation, how are you responding to it? Can you stay in control of your mind? And that is so interesting for me because, yeah, as I said, when I was so anxious, I had no control over my reaction to anything. A minor setback would send me into like a death spiral. I'd get an absolute flap about everything. So that's why I think I was so drawn to Stoicism, because it's this element of control that you have over your mind, or trying to, or working towards that, so that you choose your response to what happens.
Well, the book is called How to Be Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable. We're certainly embracing that today. But as people may be able to tell from my lighting or the sort of lower tone of voice we're speaking in, it is 5 o'clock in the morning currently. So to an extent, we are getting uncomfortable. So explain to me and the guys listening this premise between, going out of your way in this book with these challenges to put yourself in uncomfortable positions, and why that is ultimately going to benefit you.
Well, I think that leaving our comfort zones is such a great way to experience personal growth. So in my book, I talk about all of these different things that I started doing as a way to build more of a resilient mindset. Because I was in an anxious space, I needed to find a way of building confidence. And I read about all these different ideas. And the one that really resonated with me as well was this concept of stepping outside your comfort zone. Again, there's an influence of Stoicism there, because the voluntary discomfort is a thing that they talk about, where they would deliberately do something difficult or uncomfortable so that they would get used to that and be more prepared for future adversity. So I kind of took that idea and played around with it and started doing all of these crazy challenges. And actually that made a huge difference. As soon as you start seeing that you can do things, you can achieve things that you couldn't envision yourself doing in the past, it's amazing for your confidence. And especially when you're in a really bad place mentally, I think building up confidence by doing difficult challenges and difficult things, it compounds over time. And then it just brings a bit of color into your life. I love the fact that we're doing this podcast ridiculously early on a Friday morning. It just, it brings a nice little bit of spice to the day. And I think that's one of the things that stepping outside of your comfort zone can do. It can bring color into your life, and it can take you to places that you didn't think you would be able to go. I mean, I think you guys, when you set up the podcast, it must be a bit like that for you, because you've started something and look where it's taking you. It's an incredible journey.
Yeah, definitely, man. It is. And that's what I love about the book. I love how relatable it is, and I definitely reflect on that myself. And these challenges you set out in the book, they go from one extreme to the other. Some are at the top end of the scale. I mean, sleeping outside, things like that. But then there's little ones you can do. The cold showers, the the Rubik's Cube. And that's when I've actually been, since we last spoke, I've been practicing my Rubik's Cube, and I can do it now.
Nice.
And I'm just trying to get the speed down at the moment. So that was because I think when you originally sent the book and I give it to a listener, you included a tiny little Rubik's Cube in the
Yeah.
package. So I remember I was there for days with this little Rubik's Cube trying it out, and I couldn't do it. And then I eventually I bought the full size Rubik's Cube, and I sat there trying to work it out, and it's so difficult when you get into all the algorithms and you learn how to move the pieces around. And yeah, man, it is quite a mental challenge. But when you can do it, even though it's such a little thing, you get so proud of it. Like, I always tell people I can solve a Rubik's Cube now, and they're always really impressed by it, even though it's such a little thing. But yeah, that was just one of the little challenges. There's 43 you include in the book. What challenges in this book that you completed had the biggest effect on you when you finished them? What made you feel, really good after completing the challenge?
I think lots of different ones created different feelings for me. I think the ones where I completely broke through like a mental barrier, those are the ones that really stuck with me. I think, as you're saying, the Rubik's Cube is perfect because we have this perception that the Rubik's Cube is really hard to do, but actually it just takes a little bit of time. It is difficult. Yeah, it takes a bit of time, but it's not impossible. It's often used as like a symbol of someone who's like an academic genius, but actually that's not the reality of it.
Oh.
I mean, the thing is that this is the ultimate situation. If you go around to someone's house, or you just happen to be out and about, and there's an unsolved Rubik's Cube, and if you can solve it, then that's it. You are, from that point on,
you're the man.
Yeah. But it's that perception about challenge. So I think that's what was great about the Rubik's Cube, because actually doing that showed me that it's possible. The other one that was huge was running a marathon, my first marathon. Again, it was a real mental barrier, thinking, actually, can I do this? Am I capable enough to run this distance? So completing that, I was just on a high for like 4 days afterwards. It's just, it was amazing. All the other marathons that I've done since then, I've never got the same feeling as that first one, which is just that incredible sense of achievement. And also it's that perception, breaking that barrier. So that was particularly good, the marathon, I think.
With Stoicism, we mentioned some of the authors there, and yourself. These books are becoming sort of not like a second wave of interest in the subject, but they're just becoming so popular today. You see books on Stoicism coming into the mainstream quite often now. They seem to be coming out all the time. So where do you think this sort of new resurgence and interest in Stoicism in the modern life has come from? Why do you think that Stoicism is so attractive, especially to young people?
I think it's so popular and connecting with so many people because well, firstly, a lot of the ideas are so practical, and it's very secular. You don't have to believe in anything else. You can just look at the rules and the ideas and test them out, and they work incredibly well. You don't have to believe in anything, and all of the things that they talk about, these ideas are testable. So that's why I think it's really appealing. And also, life is hard. Times are tough. So I think having a philosophy of life can be incredibly helpful. Things, just look at the last couple of years. They've been very difficult. A lot of people who didn't realize that they had mental health issues have suddenly started experiencing them. And if you don't have any philosophy of life in place, or any kind of system that's helping you get through very difficult times, it's like playing darts in the dark, isn't it? You just have how do you navigate something difficult unless you have some kind of system or ideas that can help you through those difficulties? And I think that's what's so appealing about Stoicism. And I think a lot of people, like Tim Ferriss, talking about it a lot has really helped to give it this sort of Silicon Valley entrepreneur kind of vibe. So I think people connect to that as well. But then at the end of the day, I think these ideas wouldn't have lasted for so long if there wasn't value in at least some of what they're talking about. So I think that, yeah, there's a lot of things going on with it.
Do we know much about the origins of Stoicism and what its original intention was?
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the original, like the founder Zeno, and Chrysippus and Cleanthes, some of the other heads of Stoicism, all of their books have been lost in time, which is a real shame because we didn't get that. You know, the only thing we know is what other people have written about them.
Yeah.
So we've lost a lot of that original content, but we can kind of, you know, we get a sense of what they wanted to achieve with this. And it's essentially a system of living a tranquil life. The Stoics use the word eudaimonia, which is basically translated as like tranquility, or being undisturbed by difficult emotions and strong emotions. So it basically just can handle stuff that happens, which is nice. I mean, it's what we all need, really, because you can't live life without facing a setback. It's an inevitability. Things go wrong all the time. So I think it's this philosophy works perfectly for handling things that go wrong.
What would you say to those? So for me, before I started reading any Stoicism, I think the first time I probably read it, I was maybe 17, 18, going into university. But before then, my sort of perception of what it was to be Stoic was just, when I think of someone who was Stoic, I'd think of someone who had no personality. They shut themselves off from the rest of the world. They, you know, they didn't talk. They always had just a blank expression on their face. But when you speak to people who are interested in the subject, like yourself, you realize that, you know, there's a lot of personality there and a lot of, you know, smiles going on. So what would you say to people that think that, you know, to be Stoic means to just shut yourself off from everyone else and the rest of the world?
Yeah, I know it's a common misperception, I think, because the word Stoic with a lowercase s is exactly what you said. It's just someone they stoically got on with whatever they were doing, and they're kind of emotionless and almost, you know, a little bit cold, robotic. Whereas actually, Stoicism with a capital S is this ancient Greek philosophy that's incredibly rich, and there's so many ideas, and it's not a philosophy about repressing your emotions. That's not what the Stoics encourage you to do. They're encouraging you to have systems to deal with strong emotions. And I think what's happened is, you know, people think of the word Stoic with the lowercase s, and they kind of lean into that and just assume that the whole philosophy is based on that idea. But it's not at all. I mean, there's obviously ties, but the Stoics wanted us to be able to handle our difficult emotions and manage things. They didn't say that we should repress our emotions. Obviously, that's not a good idea. Repression can lead to some terrible things. So it's kind of, you know, dealing with difficult emotions and powerful feelings is something that the Stoics talk about a lot, and they've got strategies and things and managing them. So yeah, I think it's you know, we're human, we're all going to have emotions, we can't get rid of that, but it's what do we do when they crop up? And the Stoics have great advice for all these different things that we're going to encounter.
Yeah, the sort of golden rule you mentioned in the book for Stoicism is the only thing you have control over is how you respond to external events. And I think it was Seneca that said something about like the best approach to anger is to just, you know, remove yourself from the situation and, you know, think clearly about it and, you know, just remove yourself from the situation. And then you know, before and have like maybe an hour or so to just, before you react to anything, because then your reaction, your response is going to be a lot better. Your decision making goes down. The way that you view risk goes down when you're angry, when you're feeling these emotions. You're just a poor decision maker. And so stepping away and just controlling how you know, react to these external events. But how do you use that golden rule on the daily? Like, how embedded in you is it? Are you the type of guy that's going to get, you know, cut off in traffic and it's just not going to affect you at all? Or do you let it slip in now and again?
I'm a mix. I'm trying. I'm working. I'm working on it. I think the thing is, it's good. Sometimes it's just very natural. Something will
Yeah.
happen, and I'll just be like, right, okay, what can I control? I'll list all the things, and maybe I don't actually have that much control over the situation. So I'll just be like, okay, remember your philosophy, lean into that, focus on what you can control, and that can work really well. And I'd say most of the time it works, but then sometimes I forget it, and obviously it's just this constant cycle of reminding myself of this. And I'm pretty good at putting it into place, but obviously we're all human, and it sometimes slips. But no, at least just knowing that there's a strategy that works is very helpful. So yeah, I mean, the traffic thing is a perfect example, because trying to stay cool in the traffic jam, trying to keep in control is it's a very, very good Stoic test, especially if you're driving in London, where there's just, the traffic can be insane.
For sure.
And people can drive in a very aggressive way. So it's almost like you get to test out Stoicism every day. You go for a drive in London, which is, I guess, that's kind of good. You need to, what is it? The sharpen the sword. Keep doing things that are tough. So yeah, it's a great concept, and I think most of the time it's automatic, but then sometimes I'll have to put it into place. If there's a big problem that I'm facing, I will actually get my journal out, and I will physically write down all the things I can and can't control. And that exercise is really good, because there's something cathartic about using a journal anyway, but when you're just deliberate with this exercise, it's very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, Seneca never drove home during rush hour from work, did he? But
he would have struggled.
you mentioned journaling there. That's something that goes hand in hand with Stoicism. Is this idea of journaling? Obviously, that gave birth to Marcus's meditations. But like you mentioned a little bit there, but I wonder if we can go in depth. What does journaling? What do you get out of it? What does it do for you personally? Because I think a lot of people, try their hand at journaling. It is tough to form a habit with journaling. You're good for like 2 or 3 days mostly, and then all of a sudden you forget, you're behind, you don't keep up with it. But what do you get from that habit of journaling? What does it do for you?
Yeah, it's really good. I get a lot out of it. I'm not writing my memoirs every night. I'm just being quite concise, and I think that's the trick to keeping it going. The best thing about it, actually, which is kind of interesting, is that you can zoom back or zoom out and actually get a broader picture of what your life looks like over a couple of months, and that's really, really cool. Looking at repeating themes and seeing things that you wouldn't necessarily see, day to day. But when you zoom back and you look at what patterns and themes have I seen over the last 3 months, it's very hard to actually see them in the moment, or even week by week. But when you zoom back and you flick through, so what I'll do is I'll try and periodically review my journal and look back over like 2 or 3 months and see if I can find these themes and these threads. And these are often indicators of areas that I'll need to focus on in the future, and things that that might trigger me reading a specific book. And that's really the purpose. The main purpose for me is to kind of build more self-awareness, and it's a great way to kind of close the day. I like taking, I do a little bit of a gratitude thing, so I write all the nice stuff that happened, but it doesn't have to be like, oh, got a book deal or anything crazy like that. It can be, I got a really good parking space today, and but that's it. You look for the small things, and that sense of gratitude compounds. So I'll do a little bit of gratitude journaling, and then also I'll reflect, what lessons have I taken from the day, and then what didn't go so well, or what can I improve. And then when you look back and you see the themes, then it's kind of easier to spot those ideas.
So with this Stoic principles, how do you think that maybe the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, would have reacted to something like social media? I know they talk about, distraction and not letting yourself become distracted in the age of social media, where, your phone's always calling you. How do you use Stoicism to approach social media? Is this something you're good at, or is it something that, you struggle with? Because I know for me at the moment, especially with, working online and things like that. I'm maybe checking my emails a little bit too often and finding myself getting distracted. And I always think Marcus would be shaking his head right now.
Yeah, I think it's well, there's two parts to that. I think, well, firstly, how would the Stoics handle social media? Well, I actually think a lot of them would use it, and I think Ryan Holiday does a brilliant job of what would a Stoic, like a, he's essentially like a modern Stoic role model, and he's killing it on social media, millions of followers, and creating content and helping people to connect with the philosophy. So I think in the modern world, if you want to spread a message, then social media is pretty essential. So I think they would use it. I don't know if I could see Epictetus on TikTok. Well, I mean, you never know. You never know. And then the second part of the question is like, how would they think about social media? Obviously, it's a great way of channeling a message, but also I think it's, they would pay real attention to who they were following. I imagine that a lot of them would follow no one. Maybe they would have a few people that they follow, but I think they would be very conscious of that and conscious of how they're spending their time, because the perception, how we view the world and dealing with others is a very important theme within Stoicism. And online can be a bit fiery sometimes, and we can see we're living in quite a polarized, divided world. But then I think it's always been a little bit like that. But I think now with technology, people can air their opinions more freely. So I think learning to deal with other people who have a difference of opinion is incredibly important. And the Stoics can teach us a lot about that as well. And again, going back to that golden rule, what you can and can't control. Well, you can't control how other people are going to act online, but you can control your response and how you deal with it. So this is important. And you know what? Things like this should be taught in schools. It's really important. How do you manage social media? Because you can see what effect that's having on a younger generation. You just need to be careful with how we use it in our lives. And I think, that's something that if we pay attention to it, we're just disciplined and careful and try not to get sucked into black holes and end up, watching too many crazy videos on YouTube, because it's just the way that it's set out. Have you watched The Social Dilemma?
I have. It's wow,
amazing.
It's
scary though.
It is, definitely is, like the way that they talk about how your phone is sort of, it picks up on trends and it's designed to sort of give you notifications based on, what it thinks is going to make you pick up your phone, what it's going to make you unlock your phone. And then, once they get you to unlock your phone, it's the phone starts throwing things at you purposely to hold your attention, but and try to stop you from locking it again. It's quite scary, man.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's just the first step is being aware of it, isn't it? So it's great that the documentary has done that. I didn't delete my Instagram account after watching it though. I have a few friends who actually deleted Instagram after watching it. Some of them have come back. They only lasted for like a couple of months, but I think it's good to be aware of it at least. It happens, but it's just managing it, being realistic.
Well, another thing with social media that I think the Stoics would just hate is that I was watching something the other day, an interview with a neuroscientist, and he was talking about how social media is almost morphing and changing our attention span. Obviously, years and years ago, people could sit down, they could read a full book in one sitting. It was quite a common thing to do. As technologies come along, you start getting drawn to these YouTube videos, like you said. But even now with something like TikTok, where you're scrolling through videos and they're just quick videos, some of them are 5 to 10 seconds long, but they can somehow convey a message, they can somehow tell a whole story in 10 seconds. And he was talking about how, like, now on like something like TikTok, if you come across a video on TikTok and it's a minute long, people think, oh, it's too long, scroll to the next one. Like, a minute is now seen as a long time to watch a video, and a lot of people just can't be bothered to hold their attention for a minute. They want those 10, 15 second, videos. And that's quite scary. And, especially for me who makes long form
Yeah.
conversations, and people can't even hold their attention for a minute now these days. Do you think that that's quite a scary problem we're looking at there?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think there's always going to be the need for long form, though. And I think that there will be a lot of people who realize that you can't just, where do you go from like a 5 second video?
Mm.
I mean, how can it get much quicker? I guess, like, what will people look like in the next 5 years if everything just gets, shorter and shorter? You can imagine like the social media feed just being just someone just like flashes like a load of images at you, and then
Yeah,
that's it. But I think yeah, just we've got to be careful that the more we engage in it, the shorter our attention spans become. I certainly notice it. If I've spent a lot of time on social media, it can do that to your mind. So it's just trying to be disciplined with it as well, bringing discipline to the way that we use it. I'm not brilliant at that, I must admit, but I think having some kind of structure for emails as well. Some people check their emails once or twice a day, which I can't comprehend, but I know that it's probably the better way of doing
oh,
things.
definitely.
But yeah, I think it's balance, isn't it? Finding the right balance with all of this.
Oh, absolutely. I think emails is probably where I struggled the most. Like I refresh my emails multiple times an hour. I'm really bad for it. But you know, when you get that email come through, it gives you that little dopamine hit.
Mm.
It's a little reward, and it just keeps bringing you back for more. It's a tough sort of habit to get out of, like, because it's all tied in as well. It's also got that little bit of fear of missing out involved. Like, you could be sat down reading, and all of a sudden you're thinking, what if there's like a really important opportunity that's come up via email right now that I've not got back to? And a lot of the time there isn't, but there's always that chance that you could get that email you've always been waiting for, and it just keeps
Yeah,
drawing you back.
yeah, it's like the lottery.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You mentioned at the top about Buddhism, and this is really interesting to me because you said you've got no religious affiliation with Buddhism, and I think that's interesting because a lot of people get put off of certain ideas, certain ideologies or philosophies because they think you've got to be religious to benefit from them. My sort of illusion there was shattered when I spoke to, well, there was a week last year where I spoke to two monks in like the space of a week. So Gopal Das and Garanga Das. I spoke to them both back to back, and very religious guys in their own right, obviously. But I got so much value from the conversations, and both of them, told me like all these ideas that are part of their religion. They said you don't have to be religious at all to make these work for you. So do you think there seems to be this little bit of a stigma almost with a lot of philosophies where people just get put off because they think you've got to sit around in a circle and chant to the heavens to get anything out of them?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think with philosophy, people think it's, stuffy old folks reading dusty textbooks, and religion is like people doing rituals and stuff. And
Mm,
I think that's completely wrong. You need to look for the messages and the ideas, and you can take from all these different sources. For people who are more secular towards the way they live their lives, I think there's an amazing book. I don't know if you've read it, called Why Buddhism is True by Robert Wright. So good. It talks about how it's kind of like a combination of evolutionary science and Buddhism. And it's just talking about the philosophical Buddhism. And so the core ideas from Buddhism that can just translate to how we live our lives today. So I think it's just looking for those ideas and trying not to get too worried about all the other things if you can extract value from it. And this is why I'm particularly interested in Zen Buddhism. Excuse me. Zen Buddhism is kind of like Buddhism stripped back. It's very minimal. So there's not so, there's a bit of ritual, but I also like the Japanese aesthetic. but it's very minimal. It's kind of the way that it's quite pure. It's not too, doesn't feel too religious, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When they talk about things like death and they talk about what happens after death, they're just a bit like, well, we don't know. So, which is nice. I think they embrace the fact that we don't know. We don't have all the answers. I think what can be difficult for me, that I find difficult, is when people make statements about, oh, this is the answer. We have the answers, and this is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Whereas if we are a little bit open to the fact we don't know, I think that's really important, because knowledge is continually changing and evolving. And I think it's important to be open, because you never know what idea is going to just completely change your life. That's why I think books can be absolutely amazing. You never know which book you're going to read that's just going to completely change everything for you. And it might not be the first one or the second one, but you find one and it can have such an impact. And it's the same with these ideas from different philosophies. I think you just find something and you never know what it's going to be. And that's exciting. So I think there's a lot of value in all of these different ideas. So I think it's just trying to disconnect from the ritualistic side of things. Well, that's certainly how I view things when I'm approaching more, I guess, ideas from religion rather than philosophy.
Yeah, there's almost a little bit of happenstance or fate, if you will, sometimes with these books, because it's not only, you know, the right book comes along sometimes, but it's the right book at the right time. It just seems to align perfectly with your life. And that's where some of my favorite books, I wonder if I read them at a different stage in my life, if they would be one of my favorite books. So I think, 100%. That's one of the beauties of reading. But we mentioned Buddhism, that you've got a golden rule down as our mind is the source of our struggling. I wonder if you could just expand on that idea and what that means.
Yeah, so the fact that our minds cause a lot of problems for us, the way we perceive the world is the issue. And this is, I mean, the interesting thing is a lot of Stoicism and Buddhism go hand in hand. There's some real parallels, which is really interesting, because, you know, they were thousands and thousands of miles apart, and they have differences, but there are a lot of ideas and themes that are really connected. And this one in particular, like the way that our minds work, we have, I mean, back to this Robert Wright book, there's this we have an evolutionary disposition to be negative towards almost everything. It's kept us alive, you know. We just have that sense of, oh, something might go wrong, or something, you know. It's always that analyzing things in a negative way to prepare us, just in case something, you know, it is a giant cat in the bushes that's about to eat us. So it's this negative disposition that's stuck with us. We've got the same brains, you know. Our brains haven't changed drastically over the last thousands of years. So it's how we view the world, and the Buddhists talk about how our minds can cause a lot of problems for us. So it's just accepting that and learning to work with it, learning to change the way that we view the world. So the mind is so powerful. And I guess there's so many different philosophies and ideas that always state this. And that's it, really, trying to gain control, or not gain control, I guess, like at least accept that our minds can cause us problems, and then figure out how we can better manage our minds.
Another one of those terms that just gets sort of tied in with the religion, and we probably miss out on, enlightenment. How do you view the word enlightenment?
No, it's interesting. I think it's very, wow, there's so many different opinions on it, and there's, like, you read someone's account of what they would consider an enlightenment experience, it's very different from someone else's. I think it's just basically, from what I gather, it's this ability to just be cool with whatever happens. Like, you're in a situation and you're like, oh, it's just living purely in the present moment, and just not being like stressed out by absolutely everything. And I think it's not, from what I gather, it's not this like state, you know, you suddenly hit this point People who study Buddhism, oh, I've studied it for long enough, and now suddenly, I'm this special enlightened person. I think it's like you can have moments of enlightenment, or I guess like all of us, we can have a moment where we live our lives and something just works really well, and we handle something incredibly well, and we sort of ride the wave, I guess you could think of it like that. And then we fall off, and then it goes wrong. But it's just, you have moments where you're like, oh, that was really good. Everything kind of like came together, and I managed that challenge particularly well. So I think that's, I guess, how I'm looking at it at the moment. But my opinion could change.
The last two questions I have for you that we ask every guest. The first one, we've talked a lot about your book today, and I'm sure it's impacted so many people's lives. But what books have had a major impact on your life so far?
So obviously, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, that was huge. That had a real impact. I absolutely love that book. Mindset, I think this was the one that I might have mentioned last time. Maybe I should try different ones so that we don't do the same ones. Why don't I go for 3 that I've read this year?
Perfect.
That have been impactful, because otherwise I tend to always go for the same. I tend to go for like Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Mindset, and Meditations. But I think this year, so I read the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is awesome. So good. That was amazing. I read Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark, which is about artificial intelligence, and that was just crazy. So I'm really interested in that.
Yeah.
And I just finished Happy Sexy Millionaire, and I thought that was great.
Oh, wow.
Really, really good. Really interesting approach to actually some nice Stoic philosophy in there as well.
Really?
That's good. Like proper like self-help kind of straight down the line, but really, really good, really well written, like a really short read. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Three good recommendations there, and I like the way you switched it up this time. I'm sure that I'd love to have you on the show many more times before this show reaches its end. So hopefully you can bring a different answer every time, and keep us updated on your reading. The last question I have for you, so we ask every guest, and this is probably a harder question for the guests that are interested in philosophy, because it's almost probably the question when it comes to philosophy, but to make it personal to yourself. So it could be family, it could be friends, it could be your book, it could be anything. But for Ben Aldridge right now, what makes a life worth living?
What makes a life worth living? That's a very difficult question, isn't it? I think living with purpose and bringing value to what you do and everyone that you encounter. So I think doing things that are important to you and trying to figure out where you want your life to go. It can be an exciting journey, but it can be difficult. But I think a life worth living is a life where you try different things, you explore, and I don't mean like going like explore the jungle necessarily. I mean just like explore knowledge and explore the incredible things that humanity have created, and just see what's out there, and then connect with something that you like, and then try and spend as much time doing that as possible.
Awesome. I love that, man. So let's let these people know where they can find you. I know you are at Do Things That Challenge You on Instagram. The book, How to Be Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable, 43 Weird and Wonderful Ways to Build a Strong, Resilient Mindset. Let everyone know where they can find the book, where they can find more from yourself and connect with you.
Yeah, so the best place is probably my website, benaldridge.com. I've got a newsletter that goes out once a month, and you can find my book on Amazon and basically most like bookshop websites, or some bookshops will stock it. So but yeah, if you go to the website, there's loads of links and stuff for that. I'm on Twitter as well. I am Ben Aldridge. That's the handle. So yeah, those are the main places I'd say. Come and say hi. I really like getting messages from random people. It's always fun hearing from readers and from people who follow on social media. I got a brilliant message the other day. I got this picture from someone, and I got the picture first before I got the message with the context. It's just a guy in his Speedos. And I was like, oh my
Lovely.
God, what is this? And then it's like, oh, he's just done one of my challenges.
Oh, nice.
And that's why. So he's decided to wear something that will make him feel embarrassed.
Wow.
So he's put some Speedos on and he's gone for a run through town. So he just sent me this picture afterwards. I was like,
wow,
oh, he's living it. He's living it. I love that he's actually done that.
Fair play.
So yeah, it's great. So yeah, come and say hi.
Awesome. Definitely. Yeah, I encourage people to try some of the challenges, share them out, see if you can get through all 43. Ben, it was a pleasure to have you on. Obviously, the first time we did this, as we mentioned, it was audio only, so I'm glad to be able to bring, you know, the video format this time. I know there's a lot of people that listen to the show, you know, exclusively on YouTube, so it's nice to bring you to our audience on YouTube as well, and let them know about this book and this awesome concept you've got going on. So it's a pleasure to have you on for a second time. I hope there's many more times we get to do this.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be able to come and chat to you. I really appreciate the invite, so thank you so much.